Senator Thom Tillis is a Republican of North Carolina, and he has some thoughts on regulation that he'd like to share with us. This is from the Bipartisan Policy Center. Let's listen.
Don't you believe that this regulation that requires this gentleman to wash his hands before he serves your food is important, should be on the books? As a matter of fact, I think it's one that I can illustrate the point. I said I don't have any problem with Starbucks if they choose to opt out of this policy, as long as they post a sign that says, we don't require our employees to wash their hands after leaving the restroom. The market will take care of that. And so, I mean, it's one example, but then let them decide. Now, that's probably one where every business that did that would go out of business, but I think it's good to illustrate the point that's the sort of mentality that we need to have to reduce the regulatory burden on this country.
I have terrible news for Mr. Tillis. You just convinced 0 people with that example. I don't know why he thinks that's convincing, but he does think it's convincing. You can tell by how he said it. He's like, I said, that'll illustrate my point. See, I don't want nobody washing their hands if they take a shit and then serve me a burger. I'm cool with that, man. Get the government out of the situation with the feces and the stinky duty on the hands. All right, I am strawmanning him. That isn't exactly what he said. But I love how in his unregulated world, you would still have a regulation. The regulation would be put a sign if you have your employees not washing their hands. You have to put a sign saying that they're not washing their hands. So you're in favor of regulation because that is regulation. You just want a dumber regulation. You don't want the smart one which says, come on, dipshit, wash your fucking hands. Stop making people sick. What are you doing? What are you, crazy? You don't want that one. You want a regulation that's just not as direct and incredibly more inefficient. God, these guys, they're such ideologues that they can't see straight. When you have somebody make an argument like that, that's really not convincing anybody. I mean, he's only preaching to the choir to people who already agree with him. When you have somebody who's that deep in their bubble and that deep in their mindset, they're incapable of rational thought about this. He's obviously working backwards from his conclusion of regulation is bad, and now let me just cherry pick to see examples, to find examples where that proves my point, and he still picked one that didn't really prove his point. The dogmatic ideology, which is almost like a religion at this point, of deregulation is always better, is definitely wrong and definitely silly, and it wouldn't work. So first of all, there's this issue of honey laundering, which shows that we need regulation. The honeybee population has plummeted in recent years, but the price of honey has stayed about the same. Now, why is that? Because a lot of conservatives would look at that and say, what do you mean? That's a good thing, right? I mean, the price should be going up, but it's not. Well, this is why. Quote, a third or more of all the honey consumed in the U.S. is likely to have been smuggled in from China and may be tainted with illegal antibiotics and heavy metals. So, you can see clearly right here, if you don't have regulation, which checks the honey, makes sure it's safe, then guess what? These people will be eating the tainted honey with illegal antibiotics and heavy metals, and next thing you know, however many years down the road, if you keep eating it, 20 years, 25 years down the road, you might come down with heavy metal poisoning. And if the government was there doing its job and efficiently regulating, then that wouldn't be the case. But you need the government regulating in order to make sure that the products are safe. How about the Chinese rat meat scandal? Well, you have all these different companies in China selling meat and pretending it's, rather normal meat, whether it was pork or steak or chicken or whatever, but they're selling rat meat. Again, you need the government to step in and say, all right, you can't do that. Now, libertarians would say, well, that's fraud anyway, so what they're doing is illegal. But the problem is when you have a situation like rat meat versus whatever other meat it looks like, people can't tell the difference. They can't tell the difference, so they don't know what they're eating. Maybe it tastes a little differently, but would you know immediately you're eating rat meat if it looks exactly the same and if it tastes just slightly different? Maybe you don't. So you need the government to regulate it to say, whoa, okay, don't do that. You're doing something wrong here. You're not allowed to do that. Or how about this issue, the lack of regulation that allowed banks to own and speculate against their own commodities. So this essentially is just flat out rigging the marketplace. You are rigging the marketplace, and without good, efficient regulation, it is illegal to rig the marketplace and to rob the entire economy blind. Rob the taxpayers blind, rob your clients blind, rob everybody blind. You just rigged the marketplace and took the profits by making strange bets that involved things that you rigged. So obviously you need regulations there. And of course, probably the two best examples of where you need regulation. I mean, look at the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act of 1999. That repealed Glass-Steagall. Now, Glass-Steagall, of course, separated commercial banking from investment banking. So what that means is if you, a normal person who works a normal job, went to the bank and put your money in there, you did it with the expectation that they're not making insanely risky casino capitalist bets with it and they'll lose all of it. You're putting that money in with the expectation that if they're doing investments, they're relatively safe investments, right? Well, when Graham-Leach-Bliley passed, they blew up Glass-Steagall and they made it so that when you put money in the bank can take that money and do all kinds of bets on top of bets, on top of derivatives bets, on top of puts and calls, and all types of insane bets that are incredibly risky. So they're gambling with your money in a way that where they'll likely lose it. So we needed that regulation to make it so that commercial banks are separate from the crazy investment banks so that your money is safe when you deposit it there. Again, this stuff is basic. And finally, building codes. If you were in an earthquake, would you rather be in a country that has building codes or not? Very simple question. If you say with no building codes, I think you're an idiot, because you're just lying to yourself. You know that it's safer to be in a place with building codes. But that's the thing. These rigid ideologues who are against all regulation, they would have to say that. Oh, yeah, no, I want to be in a place where there's no building codes. Okay, well, then you're probably going to die. And if somebody's in a place with building codes, it's much more likely that they're not going to die. I mean, look at the earthquake in Haiti? Everything was leveled. They don't have good building codes. But if you see comparable earthquakes in more modern societies with a lot of building codes and regulations, it's much less likely that you get that amount of widespread devastation. It may still be bad, but it's not going to be as bad. So on that point alone, can't you see that some regulations are necessary to just say across the board, oh, we don't like them, we're against it as a matter of principle? Well, then you get silly people who come out and make arguments like, yeah, if somebody takes a shit, they should still be able to serve you a club sandwich and not wash their hands because freedom.